Hi, I'm Nancy Rathbun from Completely Quilted, and today I'm going to be showing you our spiderweb quilt. A spiderweb quilt is a string quilt made of a series of strips cut into various sizes, and with our technique, you just need one ruler. You don't need to cut any templates or do any foundation piecing. So the background is going to be the fabric that I used was yellow in our quilt, but you can use any color. And that's going to separate all of the spiderweb sections. So your background color needs to be something that contrasts with all your strips. So you cut your background strip, and I'm going to show you the way this ruler works. So the ruler has 3 different angles with different degree sets. So this end here is 45 degrees, and then this side is 90, and then up here you have another 45 degree angle that's not symmetrical. So you're going to use these 2 sizes here, the 45 and the 90, for our spiderweb project. So we're going to be cutting our background triangle sections by placing the edge of the ruler with the edge of the fabric. And then your bottom edge of your fabric should be parallel to the strips. So my strip's a little bit bigger than ruler, but we can still use it as long as it's parallel. And this edge is flat up here. And now I'm going to use my rotary cutter to cut these segments. So I'm going to keep that steady in place. Just take one cut. So now one edge of my strip is ready to be cut. And so I can cut a series all in a row without having to twist my fabric around. So I'm going to just rotate my fabric. And now I can just flip my ruler upside down. So when I started, the flat side was facing away from me. Now I'm going to point that towards me, and you'll be able to see that I can cut multiple pieces without having to keep moving my fabric. I just have to move that once after my first cut. So I've got that flat edge of the ruler on the fabric, and this angle is even. And then my edge of my fabric is parallel with the lines on my ruler. And I'm cutting 2 layers at a time, and then I don't have to rotate my fabric. I'm just going to move my ruler so the flat edge is away from me. So we had just cut it like this with the flat side towards me, and then I just rotate that so the flat side, the 45 degree angle, is away from me. And I'm just going to line that up with the edge again, and then make sure my line is parallel to the edge of my fabric. And I'm going to continue to cut. So I should have as many triangles as the pattern calls for out of my background fabric. And now I'm ready to sew my strips together. After you've cut your background triangles, now you're ready to sew and cut your strip sections for your spider webs. So you're going to cut your strips into various widths, anywhere from 1 inch to 3 inches. And I like to start cutting off of my yardage a 1-inch strip, and then I'll cut a 1.5, and then keep increasing the size. And then I'll get my next color of fabric and I'll cut that. You can also cut off of your scraps too. So if you have strips in your scrap basket somewhere, you can cut those up and use those for your spiderweb quilt too. So I've already sewn together my strip sets, and these are going to be sewn together, and then you'll want to press them and measure them so that you can square them off on each side so that they're all even. So if you're working with a number, say 10 inches, then you want all of your strip sets to end up 10 inches wide. And that's going to be allow you to use your ruler to cut all of those strips evenly. So I've already squared up my strip set. And now I'm going to use the same kaleidoscope ruler with the same angle to cut those segments. So this piece is a little bit smaller than my last section. And so I have my 8-inch strip line even with the bottom of my fabric. And then the top of my fabric, the little blunt edge is even with the edge of the fabric here. So I'm going to have a little bit of waste on this end, and if you had any selvages here, that would square that off when you cut this step. So I'm ready to take my first cut. And then with the same method, I'm just going to rotate my fabric, and I'm also going to rotate my ruler so the flat edge is towards me. And I'm going to still make sure that my 8-inch line is lined up with the edge of my fabric. I'm going to take my second cut. So that's one segment that's ready to be sewn. And I'm just going to rotate my ruler so the flat side is away from me again. And I'm just going to keep rotating my ruler and cutting all of my segments for my blocks. So you're going to have 8 of the spider web wedges for every block, and you're going to have 4 of the background wedges for every block. So now we're ready to sew our background wedges to our spider web wedge segments, and I'll show you that over by the sewing machine. So now we're ready to sew our background pieces with our spider web strip segments. So you're going to take one of your background pieces and one of your spiderweb pieces, and we're going to be sewing the long side of the spiderweb wedge against the small angle of the background. So we're going to use this flat edge of the background here as our guide. About 1/4 of an inch is going to poke out from underneath that flat edge, and that's going to be our seam allowance. So if I fold this back, you can see there's about 1/4 of an inch of triangle above the background wedge. And I'm just going to sew 1/4 of an inch seam. So when I open that up, you'll see that because I left that 1/4 of an inch, this edge is flat with the tip of my background triangle. So now we're going to press this seam flat, and I'll be ready to sew my next side on. So I pressed this seam here going towards my strip. So the seam allowance is underneath my strips of my spiderweb wedge. Now I'm ready to sew another piece to this other side. And I don't need to sew all the way down these edges here. There's no fabric there. That's going to get cut off. I'm just going to stop sewing and trim my thread. So now that that's edges sewn together here, I'm going to press this side as well. And when I open that up, you can see that my 2 spiderweb segments are flush. They're one straight line here. And then from the point of my background square, or my background triangle, I will have 1/4 of an inch from the edge to the point, and that's going to be my seam allowance. So when I sew these pieces together in another step, I'm not going to be cutting off that point. So it's important to have that 1/4 of an inch hanging off the edge so that you're going to have your seam allowance later on.